You are listening to Lighthearted, the official podcast of the United States Lighthouse Society. My name is Jeremy D'Entremont. Welcome. My co-host today is Cindy Johnson, award-winning volunteer for Friends of Portsmouth Harbor Lighthouses. Hi, Cindy.
Hi, Jeremy.
Today is July 23rd, 2023, and this is episode 235 of Lighthearted. In a few minutes, we're going to listen to a conversation about an amazing lighthouse location in South Africa, complete with a hotel and restaurant. You know, Cindy, there's been severe weather in many parts of the country, actually many parts of the world lately, and we want to send along our best wishes to everyone who's been affected by all that. It's been hot here on the New Hampshire seacoast, but at least we've escaped the flooding that's been happening not very far away. How's your summer going, Cindy?
Pretty good, thanks. Trying to stay cool lately, for sure. I think it might be time for a dip in the ocean.
Sounds like a good plan to me. Little muggy today.
Meanwhile, it's been in the triple digits in Tucson, where my mom is, but monsoon season has finally started. It's raining in Arizona.
Well, that's good news. Well, we could keep talking about the weather for a while, but we should probably move on. There's been so much crazy weather, we could talk all day about that. But let's get to today's interview. Before we do that, I just want to mention something very special that the U.S. Lighthouse Society is doing. We're having a dance contest. We are asking people to dance at their favorite lighthouse to an original song called Meet Me at the Lighthouse by my friend Joe Rivers.
We're on the horizon, where the sky meets the sea, looking for a safe return from our journey.
It can be one person, it can be a group of people, a lighthouse staff or volunteers, a group of kids from a dancing school, cheerleaders, or whatever. The idea is that it's based around National Lighthouse Day, which is August 7th, but the dance can be done anytime as long as the video is submitted by August 14th. So, Cindy, we are planning to do a little dancing of our own. We actually had a rehearsal the other day. Are you ready?
I think so. Yeah, so we had a wedding ceremony at Portsmouth Harbor Light on Saturday, July 15th. And then, of course, Michelle and I were there at the lighthouse, and one of our great volunteers, Dave Garabedian, too. So then, right after that wedding ceremony, when you came over to the lighthouse to practice, I'd say we pretty much figured out our dance routine then. So we'll see.
We will. I wouldn't exactly call it choreography. I don't know if I'd go that far, but we'll have fun. That's the main idea. And I want to mention there will be cash prizes awarded for this for the most creative videos, dance videos. The idea behind this is that we're really trying to foster a feeling of community among lighthouse groups and to celebrate what lighthouses mean to all of us. And again, of course, to simply have fun. All the details are online, and you can download the song online as well. Just go to the front page of the U.S. Lighthouse Society website at uslhs.org. Look for What's New near the middle of the page and click on National Lighthouse Day Dance Contest. And you'll be taken to a page where there's all the details about the contest. We've got at least 25 or so organizations or individuals that say they're going to do something for this, and I'd love to see that number go a lot higher. So let's move on. Cindy, please help me tell everyone about Seal Point Lighthouse and today's guests.
Sure, Jeremy. Seal Point Lighthouse is on Cape St. Francis in South Africa, close to the southeasternmost point on the continent. At 91 feet tall, it's the tallest masonry building on the coast of South Africa. Construction began in 1874, and materials had to be hauled by ox cart to the remote location. The builder was civil engineer Joseph Flack, who sadly died halfway through the building of the lighthouse in 1876.
The light station began service on July 4th, 1878. For many years, Seal Point was considered one of the most isolated staffed light stations on the South African mainland. The journey by ox cart from the nearest community over a beach and sand dunes was long and arduous. Eventually, a township developed near the light station, and it was no longer so isolated.
Seal Point Lighthouse has been developed into a major attraction in recent years, with a boutique hotel, a restaurant, and more. There's also a studio called Salt with yoga, Pilates, fitness, and dance instruction. Visitors can also climb the 154 steps inside the lighthouse tower for a spectacular look at the Cape St. Francis seascape.
Paul Duval is the CEO of Petrel Ventures, the company that has developed the light station site and Wesley Randles is the chef and manager of the Nevermind restaurant at the light station. I had a chance to speak with Paul and Wesley recently via Zoom. Let's listen to that conversation now. I'm speaking today with Paul Duval, who is the CEO of Petrel Ventures, and Wesley Randles, the chef and manager of the Nevermind restaurant, and both of them are talking to me from the Point Lighthouse in South Africa. Thank you so much, Paul and Wesley, for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
I want to talk about your operation there, which looks fantastic. I've been looking at the website and all the different aspects to the accommodations, the restaurant, and other things there as well. So we'll get to that in a minute, but let's just start with a little bit of history of the lighthouse there. So you're on an area called Cape St. Francis.
Actually, it's the most southeastern point.
It is the most southeastern point on the continent.
Yeah. On the continent, yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So why was a lighthouse needed at Cape St. Francis?
If you visited any part of this coast between Cape Town and Durban, really pretty much the entire sort of eastern part of South Africa, southeastern part of the South African coastline, it's a very hazardous coastline. It's a very rough coastline, plenty of storms, plenty of bad weather, strong winds. And obviously, especially before the Suez Canal, a very, very, still is obviously a very high frequency maritime route. So there were shipwrecks. There've been plenty of shipwrecks around here, and there's plenty of history and so on. Most of the roads in this village are named after various ships that were wrecked along the coastline. So it was, I think, 1874 when it was commissioned, and there was an exploratory party sent out to find the best place to put the lighthouse, and this is where they ended up. And it took about 4 odd years to reach completion in 1878. And yesterday, the 4th of July, Happy Independence Day to you.
That's right, yeah. Thank you.
145th anniversary of the first lighting of the lamp.
Oh, okay. Wow, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a big day for both of us, July 4th.
Yes.
So happy anniversary every day after the lighthouse's anniversry to you. Yeah.
Thank you. But to answer your question in a shorter form, it can be a very treacherous piece of part of the coast.
As we're speaking via Zoom, our listeners, of course, can't see this, but you pointed before we started. You pointed the camera to the window there, and I saw some pretty significant looking surf there. Is that pretty much an everyday occurrence there? Is the water ever calm, or is it pretty much always rough there?
It's a very seasonal thing. So our storms are winter storms. So this is Southern Hemisphere winter time now. We're in the middle of winter. Mm-hmm. So from May through to August, September, it's lots of storm activity coming in, typically from down in Cape Town. Comes out the sort of Southern Ocean, past the Cape Peninsula, and sweeps up this part of the coast. You get some days that it's very flat, summertime typically, lovely weather. So it's very much a winter, summer version in terms of the roughness of the seas.
Sure. Okay. So when the lighthouse was built in the 1870s, the Cape there was quite remote, right, from civilization, basically. The construction must have been quite an undertaking. Can you tell me anything about that?
It's a masonry tower, so it's built from rocks. And the rocks, the view we showed you earlier, there's an outcrop of rock 30 meters from where we're sitting right now, which if you look closely, they're very sharply angled. And that's because that's where the rock was dressed to build the tower, massive blocks of rock. So they would light fires, cold water on, lever them open and, get the rocks into shapes and form, and then build the tower. So the logistical challenges must have been enormous. There are obviously no roads at that stage. So the nearest town was a town called Humansdorp, Dorp being village in Afrikaans, local language. And that's about 25 to 30 kilometers from here, and it would be done by ox wagon.
And no roads.
And there were no roads. And there's a river crossing you have to cross a river called the Krom River, which is a fairly significant river. So significant logistical challenges, which really remained until, the road to this town was a dirt road until the mid-90s. roughly the mid-90s. The town's undergoing some pretty rapid development recently, but in the old days, you couldn't get it. There are people actually buried pretty close to the lighthouse because there were laborers that died, and there's no way you couldn't rush off to a hospital. There were no facilities. It would take a few days to get you.
Yeah, pretty isolated until the recent past, really. And I just wanted to mention, I don't think we've identified the fact that this is Paul speaking now since we've started here. Paul has been speaking. We'll get to Wesley in just a moment. So speaking of how isolated the place was, it was, of course, home to the light station there. The lighthouse was home to a head keeper and 2 assistants, as I understand, for many years. And their families with them as well, keepers and their families. Is that correct?
Yes, it's a fascinating history all on its own. And anecdotally, about 2 months after we opened the restaurant, 2 or 3 months after we opened the restaurant, which was June 2021, I was up there and there was a couple, probably in their 60s. They called me over and the lady said, "Are you Paul?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, they're just so excited about what's been done here and so on." And then she started crying. And I found that, I thought, wow. So what happened? She says, "No, this house we're sitting in with the restaurant, I grew up in this house."
Wow.
And her and her little sister, and showed me photographs of them as tiny children playing outside the house that is now the restaurant.
Wow.
In those days, that was in the 60s. Her father was a lighthouse keeper.
Uh-huh.
His surname was Adshade. And their only communication really with the outside world was once a month, a helicopter would land from what was then called PortNet, the South African National Ports Authority. And we would land with provisions, including sweets for the children and so on. And that was how they lived.
Well, that's interesting. Flying the supplies in, obviously being so remote, it was a lot quicker to fly stuff to them.
Yeah, it was also impossible to dock boats here because we're on the edge of a point in the peninsula. Even the bay was not docked, or there was no way actually to land the boat.
Okay.
The surf's too big.
So the keepers didn't have a boat or boats at the station. Is that correct? Wouldn't have done them much good, I guess.
You have to be pretty brave.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. So if there was there were boat accidents, shipwrecks within sight of the lighthouse, the keepers couldn't really do anything about it.
No, there's a National Sea Rescue Institute station in St. Francis Bay. As the crow flies, probably 4 kilometers from where we're sitting right now, that you have to go around a point. We're in a bay called Seal Bay.
Mm-hmm.
The point where the lighthouse, it's got 2 points. The point where the lighthouse is situated, which is where we're sitting now, is called Seal Point. And the far point is called Shark Point. Mm-hmm. So it tells you a little bit about marine life in this area. On the other side of Shark Point, you wrap into St. Francis Bay, and that's where the NSRI, there's a harbour, a port.
The port was only established about 12, 15 years ago. Before that, there was no real port to speak of.
Mm-hmm.
The local fishing boats used to go into the river. So we have large squid trade here, and they used to moor the boats up the river before the port existed.
So it was so remote, as we talked about. And you talked about how they brought supplies for the building construction there by ox cart, but how did the keepers and families get back and forth to the nearest settlement in the old days?
Oxwagon, yeah.
Oxwagon. Mm-hmm.
Horses or Oxwagon. Yeah, there are numerous photographs actually of wagon being pulled by oxen, either on the beach to get around sort of that way, or to go another way and go across the river a different way, but it would be Oxwagon.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, it was a 2-week journey to the town and back.
Really?
You'd have to wait till low tide to get, you couldn't travel on the soft sand on the beach. So you'd have to wait till low tide. On both sides, you'd have to wait till low tide again to cross the river. And then it's pretty much sand dunes and low fynbos to try and get between here and Newmansdorp. It would have been a hell of a trip.
I guess so. Wow, that's incredible. It's one of the more isolated places. There must be other light stations on the South African coast that were similarly isolated, right? Or is that one of the most isolated?
Most of them, obviously quite a few in the urban areas, but significant number. I think there are 48 around the South African coastline. Okay. From the Namibian side up to Mozambique, wrapping all the way around. Mm-hmm. And some more isolated than we are. Wow. We're a holiday destination. We're a tourist destination these days.
Yeah.
We're not isolated any.
Oh, I know that. Yeah, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But let me ask you, when did the last resident keeper at Seal Point Lighthouse leave?
I think it was in the late 80s.
But it's been quite a while. The light's been automated and no resident keeper for a number of years now.
A number of years. In fact, one of the ex-lighthouse keepers, Andries de Jager, lived in the village until he passed away a couple of years back, after we had done the restoration and so on. So he managed to see it come back to life, but he still lived in the village up the road.
Uh-huh.
So it was quite gratifying to see him be able to come back to the restored buildings.
Must have been fascinating for you and for him to see the progress there. Are there any other lighthouses in South Africa that still have resident keepers?
Just that Great Fish Point is the only one that has an actual. I'm not sure of the reason for it. I have been told.
Yeah, I know that in Canada they still have more than 50 resident keepers, and it's largely to keep an eye on the boat traffic and if there's any accidents to help out on that sort of thing. So I don't know if that might be the reason at Fish Point. I don't know.
I think it's another reason. It's also, it can be a very inhospitable part of the coast.
I think Slankorp in Cape Town, there's a keeper that is a full-time resident.
They have residents that live there, but they're not lighthouse keepers.
Mm-hmm.
So they typically have a precinct, like we have a precinct, got a few buildings on it. So most of the lighthouses have what you would call support buildings. Perhaps the lighthouse keeper used to live there. So they now will typically have a sort of a general manager stroke maintenance guy, but
caretaker, we might say, something like that. Yeah, we have the same thing in this country as well. So is the light at Seal Point still an active aid to navigation?
Very much so. Yeah, it's a fully functional lighthouse. It's a fully functional lighthouse. The foghorn works. The lamp works. It's very, very much so.
I'm curious, does it still have a historic lens, like an old glass lens, or does it have a more modern type lens?
The information I got on that is that optic second order 8-panel Chance Brothers dioptric rotating lens system with upper and lower belts of refracting prisms.
So it is what we'd consider a classical, people often refer to them as classical lenses, classical Fresnel lenses from Chance Brothers in England, which in our country, we got most of them from France and a small number from Chance Brothers in England. So that's very interesting to me, a third order Chance Brothers lens. It must be beautiful to see.
It is.
Yeah. So Paul, let's get more to the present day here. What led you to acquire and develop the lighthouse site as a tourism site?
I've lived here for close to 17 years in Cape St. Francis. Myself and two friends of mine, also locals, business people. It's a destination. If you live in this town, you walk past, run past, cycle past, drive past every day, almost every day of your life. It's very much a focal point of the village and a very important part of the community. It had turned into somewhat of a sort of a derelict sort of set of buildings, both the lighthouse, the wings attached to the lighthouse, the original lighthouse keeper's quarters, and the other buildings on the precinct. And all the lighthouses in this country are owned and operated by Transnet, which is what used to be Portnet. It's now Transnet. It's the national sort of logistics company. It's after the ports and so on. So they took a strategic decision in about 2018 to do public-private partnerships to try and sort of do something at these various lighthouse sites around the country. So our approach to them was well timed, and we had to go through a process of submitting proposals and go through a tender process, and it was exciting. I don't think anybody involved in this project anticipated how big it would become, because once we got into it, it became clear that we had to do more than we perhaps initially thought we might have to, which became very exciting, and we were very fortunate to be able to have done it. But there was also, it's a very important part of the community. So there was also concern that, we just wanted the right thing to be done there. We didn't want it spoiled by anyone. I think we've done that. So that was the motivating. It was very exciting, but again, we bit off a big chunk. When once we got our teeth into it, we realized it's a bigger project perhaps than we had anticipated, and then the pandemic came.
Uh-huh.
Right. So, that brought us challenges as well. But that's what motivated. We love the area, we're locals.
Yeah. So would you consider it fully restored at this point? It's never done. I understand that it's never, those things are never finished. There's always something to do in an environment like that. But basically from where you started to now, is the general restoration complete, would you say?
It's pretty much, there's a couple of structures on the precinct that still need work, but it's 90% done. The main part of the precinct, which is the tower and the original lighthouse keepers' quarters, which I don't know if you've seen images of it architecturally, it's quite beautiful, but there's a wing attached to attached to the base of the tower, one on the east side, one on the west side. So those are fully restored, and we try to get them, really just strip them down. We're just taking away what has been added over the years, just exposed incredible stonework and incredible timber, and it's just really beautiful stuff. So we're nearly there, 90%.
Mm-hmm. So as you did this work, of course, the restoration of the buildings into usable condition was the first thing, but then you converted the lighthouse keepers' quarters into overnight accommodations for the public, right? I'm wondering what sort of look or feel you were after as you did that work and prepared to open.
I think the way to sum that up is we want to really just take away layers to get back to the original, because the original is beautiful. And then that was the philosophy. It took a lot of work. It was really in pretty bad shape. To get back to the authenticity, stripping down the wood, restoring the ceilings, the timber ceilings, the stonework, etc. But you had to couple that with a clientele these days that they don't want to be cold, they don't want to be uncomfortable. They want a coffee machine. They need to be warm with a fireplace. They need Wi-Fi. We don't have televisions, so we really, it's a special experience. It's authentic, but it's comfortable.
That's a good balance. I understand what you're saying. It's I completely understand. So are the accommodations and the restaurant there open all year?
Wesley?
Okay, Wesley.
Yeah, we are open 7 days a week. We don't close at all. Restaurant that's obviously attached, we felt it was important that if we're going to have the accommodation and obviously accessible to breakfast and dinner needed to be available. So we run 7 days, 7-day operation. We don't close. We keep up the maintenance through the year as we go, which is a lot of work. But it's all part of it.
Yeah. Do you get people from all over the world coming there to stay and to eat, or is it more local, or some combination?
A little bit of a combination. A lot of people that are curious, as you would be. A lot of young couples. It's just like it's such an obscure place to stay. And we've had a couple internationals from people from Ireland and the US, and we've had quite a few, but it's really not the normal thing. And it's only been operational after 2 years, so it's like slowly starting to
catch on.
More through word of mouth. We're still trying to work hard on the marketing perspective of it. But it's a fun one. It's like you always said, it's you can stay as many 5-star hotels as you want. It's still just a box decorated differently. This is not a box.
Yeah. I know there's a lot of lighthouse buffs or lighthouse nuts, and I can say that because I'm a lighthouse nut myself. A lot of lighthouse nuts in this country who like to stay overnight. There's quite a few in this country where you can stay overnight, varying from very rustic to very luxurious, bed and breakfast and things like that. And a lot of these people who do international traveling like to stay at lighthouses. You've probably already had some of those type of people there. I imagine some people from the US, or is that correct? Have you got many from the US yet?
We have. I actually have a colleague in the US who's I think due to come out and visit. He's also a lighthouse buff, and he's based in Texas, so hardly not many lighthouses around that part of the world. But funny enough, it's remarkable who comes through, and people who pop in and tell you that they've visited every single lighthouse in the country, for example. They've traveled to this one overseas now, but it really is a niche market for people who want to visit.
When you say visited every lighthouse in the country, you're talking about the U.S. or South Africa?
No, this particular couple was South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
We were in the midst of the renovation, and they were passing through. And I think it was the first lighthouse that had been able to climb up the tower, because I gave them access, and they were obviously delighted. But it's something that if the bug has bitten, it seems to bite quite hard. Mm-hmm. People become very passionate about lighthouse.
Oh, I know. Believe me, I know. I've been doing this for about 40 years, so I know how passionate people are about it. And I hope I can come visit you sometime. I really do. Please. Yeah, I really hope so. So Wesley, just a little bit more maybe about, could you tell me what your background was and how you came to be involved with the restaurant there at the Lighthouse?
It's a peculiar set of chances, really. So I grew up as a kid working in restaurants, and found myself fortunate to work within some of the best restaurants in the world. I circulated mainly in fine dining, and ran one really good restaurant in Cape Town, and about five of them, which were always ranked quite highly in the fine dining area, and then within the San Pellegrino World Top 50, and was very fortunate through a young chef to travel a lot and cook in the US and UK and Italy and Japan, and made my way around experiencing. But yeah, when obviously COVID hit and restaurants, became pretty obsolete during that time. Yeah, it was a bit of a weird time for everyone, but through a set of friends and word and connection, that I actually wanted to move out to Cape St. Francis with my family. I've got a young son and my wife, and we wanted to move out here and start something small and simple and kind of get by, a more humble life than cooking for celebrities and journalists. But by that chances, Paul reached out to me and flew me out to come see the project with other partners, and it's kind of all history from there. But it was such a weird. So coming from Cape Town, which is extremely busy and a very cosmopolitan city, and really to move here was a completely opposite end of the world. And but it was something exciting. It was like a new challenge. It was such a weird thing we're coming to a lighthouse to start a restaurant in the middle of nowhere and see what we can do.
Mm-hmm. I bet, yeah.
It was something that we couldn't really turn down.
Yeah, I can see that. Where in the US did you work?
So I spent some time only in New York, but I spent a lot of time in Italy and South America. And usually what I did was I do stints. So I was a head chef at a restaurant in Cape Town, and then in my holiday time, what I do is I'd go work for free. We call it staging. So I do an internship. So I was still a head chef in Cape Town, but the restaurant would close, and for its annual break, I would go abroad and then work in someone else's kitchen just to learn more. Those are my holidays for like 15 years.
Wow. Sounds like you probably haven't had a whole lot of time off in all those years.
No,
I think we must throw in, you did a stint at Central.
Yeah. So
Central, which has just been voted best restaurant in the world.
Where is that again?
Peru.
Peru in Lima. Yeah.
Wow.
I was quite fortunate, because once you're in that tier bracket of World Top 50 restaurants, it's like a little bit of a club. So you have access to everyone's emails quite easily. So no one's really turning down free labor either. So it was I was very fortunate. So when I worked in Italy, I worked at for Massimo Bottura, and that was number one when I was there in 2005. That was number one in the world. And then Lima and Peru, that was actually just voted last month as number one. So no, it's been fun, but it's all just like adding knowledge and supporting your business in the background. You don't use the dishes or the techniques, but it's how to run a business and why they do things, and forward thinking momentum. It's just sharing like-minded brainwaves that help your business run forward.
Well, you have a very impressive background for sure.
The food is good.
I'm sure it is. I was looking at
won Best Destination Restaurants, the National Awards, Woolworths Eat Out Awards last year. So that's hats off to Wesley and his wife Juliet. So in our first year of operation, we got a pretty significant South African award.
That is fantastic. So the restaurant is called Nevermind. Why is it called that?
That's Paul's one.
So that's my fault. So we started this project. I mean, we negotiated with the Transnet, the Ports Authority, as I mentioned, for a couple of years. And in about March 2020, we were locked down in South Africa, as most of the rest of the world was. And we were sort of just secured our deal with Transnet and the lease and so on. They were amazed, by the way, that we wanted to continue, because we tend to forget, but things were pretty bleak back then, especially for tourist-related ventures. So we pushed ahead, and I think, the project became, I think particularly for me, it became all-consuming, but also for the team of artisans, local artisans that we employed on site. And we were here every day, all day, and it was a once-in-a-lifetime project, and it was very important to get it right, because it's a very public-facing project, and that comes with a certain amount of pressure. And it just became much more than opening a restaurant. It came to signify a lot more. Just being on the precinct, when you do come and visit, you'll see it's a very soulful, it's a restorative type of place. And during that time, a lot of people went through really serious hardships, difficulties, lost loved ones. So it came to signify much more than a restaurant. It's more of a place I think that pandemic period put things in perspective, that what you think you've got can be taken from you very fast, and the world turns quickly, things change fast. So it's really kind of, never mind, things will be okay. We wanted to be that kind of place.
Yeah, kind of put your cares behind you.
That's the philosophy behind it. Don't take things too seriously, I think, And I think Wes and I had a meeting of minds and sort of philosophy about, he made it clear to me that we don't want to be the best restaurant. He's done that. We want to be the favorite restaurant, is the way you put it to me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
It all makes,
Yeah, best restaurant and favorite restaurant are not necessarily the same things.
Yeah, definitely not.
So what sort of dishes do you serve at the restaurant? I know the menu is actually on the website, so people can look at that. And before you answer that question, either one of you remind me what the website is, the address. Is it
sealpointlighthouse.com?
That's pretty simple. Yeah, sealpointlighthouse.com.
Yeah.
So what do you serve at the restaurant?
So the food's menu's ever changing, and it's kind of whatever we feel like cooking at the time. The restaurant's still growing. We're only in our second year, and as business terms, the second year in your business is still an infant. So it doesn't have a real identity yet. So it'll always change and ever be changing. So I always focus on as much local produce as I can get my hands on, and try and find the best quality stuff, because that's my building block, always has to be the best. So started hunting a lot of venison. We're in a crazy part of the world here, where we have an amazing ocean that's in front of us and mountains behind us. And we have an incredible wildlife spectrum behind us that's a lot of people don't use. Everyone's very used to standard chicken, beef. It's normal, but we started hunting a lot last year and using the venison within the restaurant, and it became a bit of a game changer. Just the quality of the meat was fantastic, and it was a rarity because you don't really see it. So that was actually been really fun. The fish that we only use local fish that's caught here in Cape Town, France. The oysters, we get wild oysters that come off the rocks. And yeah, I try and cook without putting too much pretentiousness on it. And I've got to be very careful not to push ideas too hard, and be aware that it's a local driven restaurant, so it's got to be for the locals. If that means that they want to come a lot and they've got to come often, the menu's got to change rapidly and fast to keep them coming in and keep everyone happy and keep them interested. And yeah, the local ethos is the backbone of what the Lighthouse is. So it's more important than anything that we look after our community.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like a good philosophy to me. So it's such a beautiful location there. Do you have outdoor seating as well as indoor?
We have ocean on either side of us. We're on a fingerling of land on the point where you have ocean at 270 degrees. There's not a seat. There's not a seat in the restaurant that you can't see the ocean. As we speak now, we've got 15 whales, southern humpback whales, just reaching in front of us.
Wow.
They stick around here for about 3 or 4 months of the year. So yeah, you hear most.
Wow, it's quite a display we're watching right now, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
I wish me and the listeners, I wish we could see that.
We'll have to send you some video. We'll take. Yeah. It's a frequent occurrence this time of year.
Yeah. They're around here for ages, and the other morning we had a pot of orcas swim past, and one of them actually nailed a seal, flinging a seal about 30 to 40 feet between each other. So yeah, so that's when you're sitting on the deck of the restaurant having a cup of coffee in the morning. That's your view.
Yikes!
So it's a pretty spectacular setting. You don't get a better setting.
Yeah. Are there sharks around there?
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're like. Yeah, it's a sharky part of the world. I mean, not to scare away.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
But but they've got plenty of other food. They don't need to.
Do you serve shark? Is that one of the local fish you use, or no?
No, they're not caught around here. It's not. I mean, even if they did catch it, they wouldn't be able to sell it. So it's pointless for the fishermen. They don't waste their time.
Yeah. It seemed like it was sort of fashionable here for a while, but not so much now.
There's no reason. I think the meat's perfectly good. It's just, it's all about a market price, and if it doesn't have a market price, what's the point of catching it?
Yeah. I think some species are protected here. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I mean, like great whites are protected out here, but it's ragged tooth, and there's no reason to can't. But great whites are all protected along here. But there's a lot of wildlife out here. The ocean's really, really alive. It's with wild waters and wild waves. It's wild ocean life.
Seals.
Yeah, there are. The 2 points of the bay are Seal Point and Shark Point. So that kind of tells you that there's everything in between. We're not overrun. We're not overrun with seals, but certainly they are.
Penguins.
Well, they don't actually belong here. I mean, there was a penguin rehab center. There used to be a penguin rehab center on the precinct in one of the buildings. So they relocated to Port Elizabeth, which is the nearest big city, about 100 kilometers from here. That was about 5 years ago, perhaps. They relocated. But no.
Yeah, they were very lost right in the first place.
Okay. All right. So we should probably stop talking about the wildlife. I'm sure there's a lot more we could talk about. But people, if they go there, if they're not staying overnight or eating in the restaurant, I don't know why they wouldn't do either of those things. But if they're just visiting for a fairly short time, are there lighthouse tower tours available as well? Yep.
Every day we do between 10 and 2. We call him the lighthouse keeper, but his name's Rufus, and he's our maintenance caretaker. He's been on the project since day one, and I think he's more knowledgeable than probably both of us on the lighthouse at the moment now. This is the amount of talks he's given on it. But he gives the tour. He gives the tour every day, and it's quite nice. What Paul and the partners did is we charge a fee for the tours, and all the proceeds from that are distributed between 2 charities that we specifically only donate to. And we keep a portion aside to help up with the maintenance of the lighthouse as well. But yeah, so it's pretty much all charity driven, just on the tours.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah. How tall is the lighthouse? If I remember right, 91 feet. That's we use feet and meters. That's 20, how many?
28.
28 meters, which makes it the tallest masonry structure on the South African coast. Do I remember that right?
Apparently, yeah.
That's pretty impressive. Do you know how many steps in the lighthouse? I would guess there's 100 or so
150.
steps.
About 150, I think.
150. Wow.
It's pretty high up there.
Yeah. Let me ask you, you were talking about the place being very restorative. There's also something called Salt, a studio on the site. Can you say a bit about that? What happens there?
So we've got a long-term goal here with the control of the precinct. So we have 5 buildings on the precinct. So the idea is to get the whole precinct working in harmony. You got to be on here and everything lends to each other. So Salt was our 3rd edition. So we started with the restaurants and the lighthouse accommodation, and then the end building turned into Salt. And Salt was like a really nice little wellness studio. So there's a studio in there where they do yoga classes and Pilates and dance classes. And in the back of that house, we've done rentable rooms for physicians. So doctors or physios or anything of those, where they can all rent out. So it's almost like renting a hot desk for doctors. The idea being that there's a lot of young families and moms that used to work when they were in Cape Town or Joburg, but when they moved here, there wasn't a necessity for office, but they still had clients. So now they could rack up, all their clients and rent out their office for the day. And so it's actually really nice. It brings us a whole bunch of foot traffic. First thing in the morning at 6:30, there's 15 cars in the parking lots, and everyone's in yoga class, and that customer trickles over to the restaurant for coffee afterwards. So yeah, it was a nice little addition.
It is. There's quite a few lighthouses where you can stay overnight. There's some that have restaurants, but I don't know of any that have accommodations, a restaurant, and a studio of that type. It's pretty unique, I think.
Yeah, well, it's like as Paul mentioned, it's this lighthouse it's so embedded in the community. It belongs more to the community than it does to us. So we have to facilitate that, So to have them drive down here first thing in the morning from the house in the cold and have them around for the day. The idea is we want to keep people on the precinct for as long as possible. Come in, and you've got your morning plans and coffee and meeting friends, and move them through the afternoon into the evening. It's all just happens all on one estate.
Mm-hmm. Sounds great. You were saying, Paul, you were talking about the area there being a holiday destination now. I imagine there are other activities for people to do when they come to that area.
Yeah, we're an important tourist destination as the lighthouse, but we have many friends and colleagues also living in this town who also have fantastic tourist destinations to visit in Cape St. Francis and St. Francis Bay. There are loads of good restaurants. There's the canal system. There's a beautiful beach. The Cape St. Francis beach is just magnificent, which is right here on our doorstep. There's a coast down the other way called the Wild Side, which we're looking at down right now, which is a more rocky type of coast heading towards the Cape Town direction, which is just fantastic to explore. Incredible fauna, flora. Just inland, there's the Baviaanskloof Wilderness area. Within a couple of hours drive, you get to the Eastern Cape Big Five game area, which are some of the most magnificent game farms, game reserves in the country. Really just a short drive away. Mm-hmm. There's a lot to do. There's the beautiful Crom River. It really is not only for the Seal Point Lighthouse, just generally, it's a really, really good place.
It's a world-class golf courses.
The golf course.
World-class golf courses and fishing and whale watching and amazing surf if you're a surfer. So ticks a lot of the boxes. There's a lot to do.
That sure sounds like it. Yeah, it sounds amazing.
We've just established a restored a helicopter landing area at the precinct as well. So there will be the opportunity to fly in right to the lighthouse precinct.
Mm-hmm.
scenic flights available possibly as well? People want to do
It's
aerial
fine.
photography? Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
great.
there's an airfield literally between Cape St. Francis and St. Francis Bay, perhaps 2 kilometers from where we're sitting right now.
Mhm.
So that's a very active airfield. So you can fly in, and then, as I said, we've got the helicopter.
Yeah. So if you have fixed wing, you can fly into the landing strip here in Cape St. Francis, and then obviously helicopter. We put the facility down where they can land in. Port Elizabeth is the closest international airport, and it's an hour's drive from here. It's works out to 15-20 minutes helicopter flight.
Okay. So I was just going to mention the U.S. Lighthouse Society, and this is the official U.S. Lighthouse Society podcast, does tours all over the world. And there was a South African tour. I forget, I'd have to look it up to remember exactly when it was. I was not on it. But within the last few years, there has been a society tour to South Africa. I hope there will be another one. I think the last time there was one, I don't think you were open there. I think it was pre-pandemic. So hopefully that'll be happening again. I sure hope I can get to go along on that one. But I imagine that the next time the society does a tour in South Africa, they will visit you.
Terrific. Look forward to that.
No, it really is one of the most beautiful lighthouses as well. From an architecture and position points, it's really, really unbelievable what they built here, especially when they built it.
Right. And where, being so isolated and everything. So we already mentioned the website, which is sealpointlighthouse.com. Do people book accommodations right through the website? Is that possible? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you also on social media?
Yes, we are. It's Seal Point Lighthouse _ Cape St. Francis, and Nevermind _ Cape St. Francis is on Instagram. We keep both pretty updated and current and what's happening.
Okay, I have one final question for both of you, and you can fight amongst yourselves as far as who answers first. And this is for bonus points, okay? The question is, what have you enjoyed most about your work at the Seal Point Lighthouse?
Well, it's an easy one for me, if I can go. It's the smiles on the staff's faces and the customers' faces. That's everything. If it wasn't for that, it would have been a pretty pointless exercise. So that's the motivation, and it's a strong motivation. We created roughly 40 new jobs, and in a country that desperately needs new jobs through this venture so far, and that's a tremendously gratifying thing.
And through unskilled labor as well. You remember here we're talking about uplifting from the community that had zero skills. So we're introducing skills from ground zero. No, it's pretty important. I think the most gratifying point about being here is what we're trying to create here is by no means easy. As in like I said, we're in a remote place. There isn't, thousands of people around us, but what we're doing it in, it's not a closed box. It's not a standard room we're working with ever. It's all unique, and we open to the elements, and whatever we create, it takes a lot more thought and a lot more forward thinking about everything. It's the challenges every single day, but it makes it really interesting. So the challenge is the interesting part. It really is how to make it work. And like Paul was saying, easier. We can't cock this up. We got to get it right, because it does. It means a lot, not only to us, our staff, but also the community that we live in.
Well, obviously, both of you have a real passion for this project. It's great to hear. And from where I sit, you're doing things right for the community, for the public at large. It looks like you're doing pretty much everything right, as far as I can tell. So congratulations on all that's been accomplished there, and on what you're doing in general. And Paul and Wesley, I want to thank you so much for joining me today for this podcast. And like I said, I hope to come there sometime and meet you in person, possibly with the U.S. Lighthouse Society tour. That is definitely my hope. But just keep up the good work. Great talking with you today.
Thank you, Jeremy. That's very kind of you to reach out to us, and we're very, very pleased we were able to chat to you. Thanks so much. Look forward to seeing you. Yeah.
To learn more, go to sealpointlighthouse.com. There's information on the accommodations, the menu at the restaurant, and lots more on the site.
Seal Point really looks like one of the most amazing lighthouse operations I've seen anywhere. As I said in the interview, where else can you find a beautiful and historic lighthouse in spectacular surroundings with overnight accommodations, a restaurant, and a yoga studio?
Nowhere?
Right answer.
Be sure to check out uslhs.org to learn more about all the things the U.S. Lighthouse Society offers, including unique tours, preservation grants, the passport program, and much more. Remember that donations and membership help support this podcast.
Before we sign off today, I want to mention that two friends in the lighthouse world have passed away recently. Bruce Roberts, who had a long and very distinguished career as a photographer and also as an author of lighthouse books, passed away in June in North Carolina. And Tom Chisholm of Michigan passed in late June. Tom and his wife Darlene took part in dozens of the U.S. Lighthouse Society's tours over the years and photographed more than 4,400 lighthouses worldwide. I just saw them, Darlene and Tom, on the tour, Long Island, New York tour in May. Both Tom and Bruce were just the nicest guys, and they will be missed greatly. So do you have a quote, Cindy?
I do. The Roman philosopher Seneca once said, quote, "The comfort of having a friend may be taken away, but not the comfort of having had one," unquote.
We will be back with a new episode next week. For now, to all our regular listeners and our new ones, thanks so much for listening, and
keep a good light.
Out in the dark, I'm gonna let it shine. Out in the dark, I'm gonna let it shine. Out in the dark, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine.